Welcome to the webinar today. Welcome to the Blue Marble webinar for January 2014. With me today is Jasmine Bird. Good morning, Jasmine.
Hello, David, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning.
So nice to hear your voice. I'm sorry we were having some audio problems just a minute ago.
That's okay.
Today we're going to be covering Global Mapper 15.1. This is a interim release, kind of a midterm release, if you like, of the Global Mapper application. We released version 15 the latter part of last year. There has been enough changes, enhancements, fixes that have been put in place so we are releasing an interim build. Now this build will be free if you're a current user of version 15, and as you will see, as we will hopefully demonstrate throughout the course of today, we will give you enough reason for you to go ahead and download this version and update your version of Global Mapper. Before we begin, there are a couple of housekeeping issues that we need to talk about. So, Jasmine.
That's right. All webinar attendees are currently in listen-only mode. However, if you would like to ask a question, you can use the Questions tool on the GoToWebinar panel to the right of your screen. Blue Marble Product Specialists will try to answer your questions as they are submitted, and we will also address any outstanding questions at the end of the presentation.
And don't forget as well, if you have questions after the webinar, the email address you'll see at the bottom of your screen gives you the opportunity to basically email us at any time with any of those questions that you have. You may be watching the recording of this webinar, and if you have questions about any of the functionality that we're covering today, please don't hesitate to use that email address. And I will be sharing that email address with some other contact information at the conclusion of our presentation today. A few upcoming events, Jasmine?
Yep, there are a couple upcoming events. We would like to point out that we will have staff attending. On January 30th, we will be at the Maine Society of Land Surveyors Conference in Freeport, Maine. On February 5th, we'll be at ServCon 2014. That's the New Jersey Society of Professional Land Surveyors in Atlantic City, New Jersey. On February 13th, we will be at the IPLSA conference. That's the Illinois Professional Land Surveyors Association in Springfield, Illinois. On February 17th, we will be at the ILMF International LiDAR Mapping Forum in Denver, Colorado. And on February 24th, we will be at EURISA GIS CAMA Technologies Conference in Jacksonville, Florida. All the dates listed are the starting dates, so each event might go on for a couple days.
Thanks, Jasmine. Yes, you can see our schedule is starting to fill up, and it will continue to do so as we move into the new year, the midsection of the year. So chances are, if you're interested in coming out and meeting one of the Blue Marble staff, we'll be coming to your part of the world at some point. So what are we going to be talking about today? Let's take a look at our agenda very quickly. Basically touching on the high points of Global Mapper 15. By way of laying the groundwork, so to speak, we're going to review very quickly some of the new features that were added for the initial release of 15. And again, this was towards the latter part of last year. A very quick review. For those of you who weren't able to catch our webinar, we'll give you that information. And if you want more detail on this subject, the webinars have been recorded. That webinar is available on our website. You can go back and find out everything about the previous release, the full version release of version 15. With regard to what's new in 15.1, we have expanded significantly our online data accesses. Some very interesting new online data sources that we're hopefully going to have a chance to demonstrate for you today. We've added support for a Microsoft SQL Server. The SQL Server spatial databases are now supported. This is something that's been requested many times. All being well, we'll be able to demonstrate that functionality for you as well. We have expanded our raster calculation functionality. This is something that was added with the releases of 15. There's some new functionality, some pre-configured raster calculation formulas in there. We've also expanded the applicability of this tool to include elevation layers as well. So it gives you some interesting possibilities with regard to interacting and working with your raster data. We have several new digitizer tools. Jasmine's going to spend some time showing you some of the new digitizer functionality that's in the software. And we have a number of new LiDAR and elevation tools. Specifically, we're going to be looking a little bit at the profiling tool. Some very interesting new ways of generating an elevational profile. We'll spend some time looking at those as well. Oh, we're not quite there yet. So let's take a look very quickly at the current build. And again, by way of introducing some of these new tools, let's rewind slightly and talk about some of those changes that were made for 15. This is obviously applicable to those of you who are still working on an older version, perhaps version 14 or even an earlier version. Very quickly, we're going to take a look at some of those new functions that were added. One of the major changes, and certainly this affects us internally as well as our customers' interaction, is the way that we deploy the software. We have a new extension, a module extension manager that allows us to develop modules and allows us, customers, if necessary, our users to develop extensions that enhance the functionality of the software. A couple of examples, if I go ahead and open up this dialog box, we have our GEM, which is our Global Energy Mapper module. Previously, that was a separate application. Now it's a module. You can activate it with an appropriate license. You will also notice we have a LiDAR module in here. I'll talk about that one in just a second. As far as extensions, we have a Coast extension. A couple of months from now, we're going to be doing a webinar that covers the Coast application, so stay tuned for more information on Coast and what Coast is. We also have a very simple little overview extension that I have enabled, and you'll notice a little button in my toolbar that allows me to display an overview map. So this module extension manager is a new function in the version 15 family, and again allows us a lot of flexibility in terms of deploying new tools to you, the users. Speaking of the LiDAR module, you'll notice an array of buttons in the toolbar. This is my LiDAR module, or the visible manifestation of the LiDAR module. Allows me to change classification, apply color to LiDAR points from an underlying image, to filter my LiDAR points. So the LiDAR module has been developed and released to really enhance the LiDAR processing capabilities of the base level of Global Mapper. That's a new function that was added in 15. The raster calculator, as I mentioned before, from my analysis menu. I'm not going to go any further than showing you the menu item, because we will be coming back and looking at this in the context of what has been added in the version 15.1 release. But this was a new function in version 15. We've expanded support for exporting and importing 3D PDF data. Really interesting way of deploying data, of sharing data in a 3D environment. If you're using 15 and you haven't tried this already, go ahead and load up some elevation data, perhaps a LiDAR point cloud or maybe a raster elevation surface, and generate a 3D PDF. You can load that right up in Adobe Acrobat, and you can manipulate the view, change the pitch and the angle of the view right in Acrobat. So it's a very interesting way of sending 3D data to somebody who perhaps doesn't have access to a inherent GIS software package. So that's new. That's brand new in version 15 as well. And finally, we changed significantly the way you administer projection, coordinate system, and datum management. There is a new tool, and I have not activated in my current setup, but there's a new component that allows you to make use of Blue Marble geographic calculators, inherent datum data source, datum projection, coordinate system data source from geographic calculator. Now that's a mouthful, I know, but basically it gives you a lot more bang for your buck when it comes to managing projections, maybe doing some datum transformations. It's activated right here in the configuration dialog box. If I scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll notice it says GeoCalc. Kind of an innocuous little button here, but it really significantly changes the way you manage your projection and coordinate system management capability. This is something that's been discussed for many, many years and finally implemented with version 15, and obviously with version 15 it carries over as well. So those are just some of the highlights, and again, if you want more detail on those, go back to the webinar that was recorded end of last year. I believe it was October of last year we actually did the webinar, and you'll find more information about the 15.0 enhancements. Let's move up to 15.1. That's what we're looking at right now. It was released a couple of weeks ago. It is a free upgrade, as I mentioned. If you're using version 15, you can download it right from our website, run the installer. It will override and install right over your version 15 installation. It will sit side by side with any previous version. So in other words, if you're working on version 13 right now, and maybe you want to see what version 15 is all about, you can download that application today. You can request a 2-week trial. It will not affect your current installation. Version 13 or 14 will continue to exist once your trial expires. We would hope you would consider upgrading at that point, but your version 13 will still be there. You will not lose any of the compatibility or the capabilities of that software. It's not an override of a previous version, in other words. If you haven't upgraded to version 15 yet, and we're going to find out what percentage of you have not, we're going to conduct a poll a little bit later, but if you have not, I would seriously suggest you consider it, because right now, if you're setting one version back from the current version, in other words, if you're using version 14 of Global Mapper, you get a significant discount on the purchase price of a version 15 license. Really, there's no reason why you wouldn't. It is a very inexpensive upgrade. If you wait until we release the next whole number version, version 16, later in this year, you're going to miss out on that discount. You'll get a little bit of a user discount, but it certainly will not be deeply discounted like we do for each generation. So it really makes sense to upgrade. You're getting new functionality, but you're also getting a very inexpensive upgrade. Version 15.1, just a note to myself here to remind you, this is an accumulation of all of the development effort over the last several months. Development just doesn't happen at a single point in time. It's continual. And Mike Childs has been working day and night, seemingly, to make changes, to update, to add improvements to the software. What you're getting today is the accumulated work that Mike has done over that time period. The What's New document, which you will be prompted to view when you install, is over 10 pages of single-line text, bulleted single-line text. So there's a lot in this tool. There's a lot of new functions in 14 and 15.1. I will not be covering all of those today. Jasmine and I will hit on the highlights. We will not be covering all of those. If you want the full details, you can refer to that document during installation. So that, just by way of introduction. Jasmine, I'm going to hand over to you now. And, I believe you have some information on some of the basically general and the file management improvements.
You are correct, David, and thank you. So I'm going to go over some of the general file management updates, and you'll notice I have a sample workspace open here. There's now an option if you right-click on a particular layer in the Overlay Control Center. If you wish to omit a particular layer from a multi-layer export, or you just want to sort of put it on the lockdown so that you aren't including it in exports from the Global Mapper application, you'll see now on the right-click option, you select the layer you would like to either allow or disallow from exports. Right-click, and you'll see that you can check off to allow export from selected layers. If you uncheck that, then it will be excluded from any exports. Additionally, we have sort of if you're creating any changes in your workspace, say you are adding some features with the digitizer tool, and you've been working and you're not sure if you have any unsaved changes, you'll now notice up in the title bar, once you've added a feature to Global Mapper, there'll be a small asterisk after the name of your project, indicating that you have unsaved changes. So, of course, before you close your workspace, you will want to make sure to save any changes. We have, thank you, David, and we have one additional, another addition I would like to cover in the Search Attributes dialog. You can now make statistics displayed if you right-click on a numeric column in the search dialog for attributes and select to display stats. It will show the statistics for that particular area. We have a minimum value, maximum value, average, the total, and the standard deviation. And you can use the Control-V to copy those to your Windows clipboard if you would like to paste those summary statistics elsewhere. We've also added a recent file types filter. This will track commonly used file types As you open files, those that you use most often will be added to the filter. It will start with contents of the commonly used formats filter, but will adapt over time as you use the software.
Thanks, Jasmine. Just one note about the statistical breakdown. I think this is a very interesting tool that Jasmine demonstrated. It will not work, obviously, with a field that does not have a numeric value. If it's a text field, obviously, stats will not work. We don't have any statistical information about something that's in text format. But it provides a really nice way of looking at the summary for the statistics within that tabular view. So thanks, Jasmine. Moving along, let me go ahead and unload what you had done here, Jasmine. Data access, my kind of bulleted point here says talk about data access, and there's numerous improvements that have been made to getting data into Global Mapper. One of the bullet points I mentioned during my introduction was now we support the SQL Server Spatial Database. For those of you who have not used any of the database spatial database connection options, there is a separate option here under the file menu for opening those spatial databases. If I go ahead and select that, I actually have this pre-configured, and I select open. You can see a couple of databases here. I've got one called test, and I'm just going to go ahead and select OK. The import process it will give you the same end results if I had imported a file, but this is actually pulling data directly from a SQL database. Any manipulation I make, any changes I make, any modifications I make, initially are just within the context of Global Mapper, but then obviously we can go and take that information and we can write it back out to our spatial database again. So read and write support. Now, Microsoft SQL Spatial is not the only database, but this is something that's been added. It's been something that's been requested by our users, and it's been added to Global Mapper 15.1, the setup in Global Mapper 15.1. You can still work with ArcSDE, Oracle Spatial. Those databases have been in there for a while, but this is a new one where now we can work with our SQL Spatial, SQL Server Spatial. Couple of other data access enhancements. Specific to our online data sources. Those of you who haven't used online data sources, you might want to take a look at some of the options because this list is expanding significantly. By the way, you will notice when you click on this button that we have a number of pre-configured categories. Some of these you will have, some of them you will not. I have one called New Hampshire, for instance. I was down in New Hampshire a few weeks ago, and I actually added some custom sources that I could pull in while I was there. So you can add your own categories in here, but you'll notice that we have a number of pre-configured, including land cover. Now, we're going to try to pull in some data here. There's no assurance that our bandwidth and or the availability of data will work, but we'll try. One of the new sources is our Globe Cover ESA. This is a global land cover data set. It's got 300-meter resolution. I'm just going to pull it in for the area on my screen right now. We'll just go ahead and connect and see if it will actually work for us. And if not, we will abort and we will, oh, there we go. It looks like it's actually working. So this is a land cover data set that's freely available to any Global Mapper user. You can see the pre-configured shading here. In fact, with this particular data set, we can go into the overlay or the map layout setup dialog box and actually apply a legend here based on this color palette. I'm just going to go with the defaults. I'm not going to filter it in any way. And we'll just go ahead and apply that. And when my map refreshes, hopefully on the right side, you'll now see the legend. So those colors that were applied, you can now see what they represent. This is a free data set, freely available to anybody who's using Global Mapper 15.1. So that is new. Let me go ahead and we'll remove that one so we don't clutter up our map. We have a number of data sets available now from NASA, specifically what they refer to as their Global Energy Browse data sets. I'm going to unload this data set. I'm going to go to a global view, and right here in my online data source, we now have a dedicated category called NASA Gibbs. This is, again, new in 15.1. Be prepared. This is a very long list. A lot of the descriptions here you may not understand. There is access to more detailed information. If you right-click and go to the web page, I'm not going to do that right now, but you do have access to the information about each of these data sets. I'm going to import one called Cloud Top Temperature, if I can find it in this long list. let's see, cloud top temperature day. We'll go ahead and select that one, and I'll go ahead and connect with that. Now, what's interesting about these data sets is once you make that connection, you will then be prompted to enter a dimension value. Now, in this case, the dimension refers to the date. This data has been archived on a daily basis. So as you can see, I've got the current date in here right now. I'm just going to go back a few days. Let's go back to the 25th of January, and we'll click OK. And again, hopefully the server will cooperate, and you can see at a global scale, we now have that cloud top temperature information for the 25th. So really, there's extensive data access available to us here with this information, with these data sets. Again, all of those categories, and you can get more information, as I said, on the website. And then time series, you can download the time to get that specific snapshot, if you like, of the data. I'm going to bring in a reference layer so that we can get some more specific information. Actually, I'm going to load in the data I just had from my spatial database to bring us back into a more localized view. So I'll import a section of the coast of Maine. Now I'm going to zoom in a little closer here to show you another example of some new access to data. Again, within the online data source download, I'm going to collapse this menu to make it a little more easy to read. We now have a LiDAR section. The LiDAR section has two line items here. One is just a link to a Wikipedia site that will list available LiDAR data sets. The other is the USGS. Now, for those of us within the US, within the bounds of the US, USGS provides through their Earth Explorer interface access to quite a number of LiDAR data sets. And if I select that option and I click Connect, and again, we're going to depend on the availability of their website, it will take you directly to the Earth Explorer website. When this refreshes, it will show me data sets that are available for my area of interest. I'm just going to zoom into one particularly. If I zoom out slightly, you will see rendered on my screen in this red box the extent of my map in Global Mapper. This is the extent of where I was querying. This is a very efficient way for me to go to the USGS website with some pre-configured geographic area as defined in Global Mapper and see what LiDAR data sets are available. Now, certainly it doesn't connect in real time, but it gives me the opportunity now to simply download the selected data sets. If this coverage area is what I'm interested in, I simply use that download button to connect to that data. To download that data set, it can be loaded in as any other LiDAR file. So very efficient communication between Global Mapper and the USGS's Earth Explorer website. And that pretty much covers it for looking at online data. Let me again wipe the slate clean and hand back over to Jasmine. Jasmine, I believe you're going to tell us a little bit about some of the rendering and style changes that have been added.
I am, David. Thank you. So we have some new line styles that have been added for rendering lines based on elevation. So you just generate some contours here. So I'm just going to use the default settings for generating a contour layer. And then what we'll see is for the Overlay Control Center, we now have options to change the line style for those contour lines. So if we go to the Overlay Control Center, Options, Line Styles, and then Select Style, we'll see that I'm just going to choose Elevation Solid from the menu. And we'll see that we can change the pixel width as well. And for now, we're just going to use the elevation solid and go ahead and apply those changes. And if we deactivate the DEM layer, we can see that now those elevation lines are colored by elevation values, sort of an additional visual aid if you want to use the elevation contours and color the lines. Additionally, we have some added support for specifying a background color for lines. Just load the roads layer, and you're going to access it the same way through the options menu, and then go to line styles again, and you can use the same style for all features. And we'll see again that here we can change the color and the width of the lines, and we can also add a background line that can be a different color and different width. We want to highlight specific lines. You'll see that we can use that for highlighting. In this instance, I've highlighted all the roads, but you can use it for highlighting specific lines or an entire layer if you wish. And we've also made an additional update to style changes where you can update feature info tips. If you go to View and Enable Info Tips, you'll see that as you hover over a feature, a little tooltip pops up. This can be further edited. If you go to your View menu, Configure Info Tips, and we can include a custom attribute string now. So hit the Setup button, and name in this instance is the name of the road. So if I want to add this road is called, and then have the road name pop up, I just want to add this road is called, and then hit OK. And then we'll see that the feature info tip is updated. So now the info tip says this road is called and then the name value for that particular road.
Thanks again, Jasmine. That's an interesting one. I can see a lot of uses where the generic text that's displayed when you have the info tips is probably not that useful. Here you can customize it and make it understandable. This road is called Central Street. That's very interesting. Continuing along, we're going to take a look now at some of the, actually, let me pause briefly. I'm looking at the clock here, making sure we're on task. We're about halfway through, so we're going to take a break. We have a poll, as we do customarily. We have a poll. We're going to ask you a question. We're going to ask you to respond to a question. In a couple of minutes here, a couple of seconds, when I actually can launch the poll, your screen will change. You will see on your screen a question, a multiple choice question. The question is a very simple one. Which version of Global Mapper are you currently using? Your options, as you will see in just a second, are the current version, version 15, and we include version 15 and those of you who have adopted 15.1. We'll collectively group you together. Version 14, an older version. We consider those of you still on 13 now to have an older version or anything prior to 13, or you're not currently using Global Mapper. Now, we're going to leave that open for just a few minutes, let you guys respond to that. We can see the results coming in. It looks like, wow, it's going back and forward between 15 and 14. It looks like most of you actually have updated to 15 already. That's great. So quite a few still on 14, a few of you on older versions, and as of right now, 6 or 7% of you have told us that you're not currently using Global Mapper. Hopefully, those are the folks that I'm hoping will get the most out of these webinars, because we really want you to jump in and take a look at Global Mapper. We're confident it will work for you and be a good GIS application in your situation. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Hopefully you had a chance to answer, and I'm going to share the information, and hopefully you will see the results of the poll. As you can see, a little under half of you have already upgraded to 15. I'm assuming some of you in that group are already at 15.1. Those of you who are not, of those 48%, you have the option to upgrade to 15.1 at no cost. The version 14 users, you can get a deeply discounted upgrade to the current version. So we will go ahead and hide the results. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for sharing in our poll. Okay, we are now going to look at some of the LiDAR and 3D changes that have been applied. Again, Jasmine's beautiful artistic work. Unfortunately, I'm not going to save it. Sorry, Jasmine. We will go ahead and wipe the slate clean. And I'm going to load up some LiDAR data. Those of you who have not used LiDAR data, it's certainly a topic that we have covered at length in the past. Again, webinars have been recorded on this topic. Feel free, if you want to go back and spend some time looking at those previous webinars where we go into some of the details of working specifically with LiDAR in Global Mapper. Today I want to talk about specifically what we have changed, what has been been added, what has been modified. One of the very simple changes, and it's really something was almost like an oversight in the initial implementation, is if I have an area feature, and this is just a generically created area feature, it's not of any significance, I'm going to use my right-click option in the Overlay Control Center to select that. You can't really see it on my screen. It's there, believe me. LiDAR point cloud has actually made it difficult to see. But I'm going to select the feature. It is highlighted in there. You can barely see it. Now, within that area, I now have the option under my attribute style functions to add a count of points. I always get that backwards. A count of points within that selected area. Now this is going to add an attribute that's going to basically count how many LiDAR points are within that area. Now in my case I arbitrarily drew a shape. This might be something more defined, a defined localized area within a property, within the bounds of an administrative area. How many LiDAR points do we have within that area? And it's a very simple process. I simply click on this option. It confirms for me that that action has been taken, and to verify that this actually worked, I will turn off my point cloud for the time being, use my feature info button, and I can tell there's 14,000 points right within that area. Now this is something that was added obviously as an attribute. If you have an existing attribute table associated with an area, it'll just add a new attribute to that list. So very useful tool for that purpose, specifically to LiDAR for determining the LiDAR coverage within a defined area. So that's a new feature within 15.1. We've also added a tool, enhanced the tool I should say, that was introduced in version 15.0. You'll notice that in my toolbar I've clicked on the profile button. A profile button, those of you who are not familiar with the Global Mapper, is a tool that lets you generate an elevational cross-section, typically used with a raster elevation layer, but in this case, and something that was added with 15.0, we can now do that with a LiDAR point cloud. Now, a LiDAR point cloud, let me just try that one more time. LiDAR point cloud is a point database. So it kind of, it doesn't really work the same way. If you draw a single linear path, obviously it's unlikely that the path would follow through a lot of points. So we need to expand that path. And the path setup allows you to specify the corridor width. So you can see I can specify that lateral dimension, if you like, for the path. It's no longer just a single line. So you can change that. I'm just going to leave it as it is right now. Now, the new function that has been added is the way that you can select these LiDAR points. Based on my selection, I'm going to assume that these are vegetation points. And I'm going to change the visual representation to show that. Well, these aren't rendered as vegetation points. These trees are actually rendered as unclassified. So I want to select all of these points. There's a couple of ways of doing that. The default way, as it has been, is simply to drag a box, and you'll see them all selected. Now we have the option to manually draw a polygon to select those points. So gives you much more control over selecting a specific group. And you can see the selection process now has targeted just those that were within the bounds of what I selected. Once those are selected in this case, we have the ability to change the classification using the buttons in the toolbar. As you can see, I've made all those points vegetation points now. So that's a new function that has been added. The ability to create that cross-sectional view, that was added in 15. Now the ability to select, based on the path width, all of the points that fall within that area, and it allows you to do very efficient reclassification, as you saw in my example. I'm going to load up another data set here. Continuing with the theme of elevation. We'll dispense with our LiDAR, and I have a generic elevation data set. The Path Profile tool. A couple of changes that we've made to the Path Profile tool. The first one I'm going to show you is perhaps the most significant, and certainly one that's been requested quite a lot. You'll notice a little tile right in the middle of my screen. If I zoom in close, basically this is an arbitrary offset elevation. If I look at in my 3D environment, you'll see it's actually a trough. You'll see it actually is embedded into the terrain. With the profile tool, previously, if we generated a cross-sectional profile, the cross-sectional profile would only address the elevation layer that was on top in the map. In other words, the one that is dominant, the one that takes precedence. Now we have the ability to generate an elevation profile. I'll just do it across this, this tile, that actually takes into account the original terrain and also shows me the offset model, the secondary model. We can get 2 lines or more if you like. If you've got multiple overlapping elevation surface models, you can generate multiple cross-sectional profiles using this dashed pattern. Now again, the layer that sits on top is the one that's defined by the master profile, the green area if you like. The dashed line is the original. If I adjust the order of my elevation layers, let me go ahead and move the order, so my offset elevation is now underground and I can't see it, I'm going to generate my profile again, and this time the tables are turned. My surface model, you can see the underground, the offset model is now the dashed line. So multiple surface areas now can be profiled using this tool. Also, and let me move off to a slightly different area, so we've only got one surface model. I'm going to use a line feature in this case to generate a profile. I'm just drawing an arbitrary line. I'm going to select that line with my digitizer. I'm going to right-click under my analysis menu, measurement submenu. I'm going to choose path profile. Same end result as if we had arbitrarily created a line using the toolbar button. But in this case, you'll see my cross-sectional view. I have the option of generating a perpendicular extended area along this line. And again, obviously this is just a single dimension linear feature. But now if I want to generate a path, if you like, a wider path, I have the option under path setup to specify the corridor width. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll establish a width of, let's make this a little bigger than 7 meters. Let's make it 30 meters. And we'll click OK. Now, initially, there's no change in the view. You'll see that visibly displayed in just a second. But one of the things we can do now within that path is to define exactly what it is we're profiling. Again, thinking of the fact that we now have a 60-meter wide swath, and as opposed to just a single line, that would be 30 meters on either side. I can display the maximum elevation along that corridor, the minimum, or the average. I'll go ahead and choose the minimum in this case. And you'll see again the green profile represents the minimum elevation along that path. It's difficult to actually see that path on my top-down map, but that's actually an area represented, it's a buffered area. And this profile view shows me the minimum elevation along that path. Maximum is also available, and average, so you can generate profiles with those 3 variables. The dashed line in this case represents the original center line, if you like, the profile along that center line, and you can see the offset as we go along between that center line and the minimum. So a new function that has been added. While we have that single line, I'm going to draw another line, and this time I'm going to select both. Now, this is new as well. Right-click, analysis measurement, and previously this would not be available if I had multiple lines selected, but you'll notice a subtle change here where we have the plural for line. Along lines, we're now able to generate multiple profile lines simultaneously, and as you can see, I've got 2 cross-sectional views. This tool may be useful if you do a perpendicular analysis at specific distances along a valley floor, for instance. You can see what the cross-sectional view would be like at specific distances as we move down that valley floor. Up to 8 profiles can be generated simultaneously. Now, obviously, in a practical sense, this would be a good idea if you had a second monitor. You could move these over to the second monitor and see them all simultaneously. So those are some of the changes that we've made to working with elevation data. I'm just looking down my notes here, making sure I'm not missing anything. One thing to mention, this has been requested as well. I'm not going to show you, but that profile view, we can now export that profile view as a DXF file. So if you're working in the AutoCAD environment or you want to generate a 3D line feature from that profile line, you can export that as a DXF. That's a new function that has been added. Oh, one more again, just not taking the time to go through every bullet, but want to mention generating contours. Those of you, especially if you use LiDAR for contour generation, may have noticed that there very often are very small little sections of LiDAR generated. With 15.1, you can establish a threshold that allows you to remove those automatically. So you will not get those little, small little polygons or little area features generated from or line features, I should say, generated from those contour lines. You can filter those during the generation process. Any questions coming in, Jasmine? Any questions you want to share with us through the panel?
There was one question about the raster calculator. One user asked if the raster calculator was available without any additional licensing required.
Yeah, the raster calculator, by the way, is something we will be covering hopefully in a few minutes here. Raster calculator is in the standard version. It does not require, it's not married into any of the modules or any of the advanced components of the software. So any any edition of version 15 will give you access to that raster calculator functionality, which I will be showing you in just a few minutes. So keep those questions coming in, by the way. I know there are folks sitting on the sidelines answering your questions in real time, so any others that come along, we'll go hopefully address those. Jasmine, I believe you're going to tell us a little bit about some of the other digitizer updates that have been added.
Yep, I'm going to cover a handful of updates that we've made to the digitizer tool. So first, I'm going to cover the new polygon selection mode. Traditionally, when you're selecting multiple features in Global Mapper, you would sort of use a click-drag motion to select multiple features. We have a new option available, and you can activate it through the Advanced Selection submenu. And it's called Poly Select, and it'll allow you to draw a polygon to select features on the map. This can be handy in defining a region to select features within, as opposed to the click drag, which is quick and handy, but a little bit less specific than the poly select. We've also added another feature to the digitizer toolbar. It enables the user to create an ellipsis, and you can define the major and minor axis length and rotation, and it's called the Create Range Ring option. And here you will see you can select your range ring and ellipsis parameters. I'm just going to go with the default. And you'll see that you get a very nice and tidy ellipsis as the result of using that tool. We've also made an update to the grid creation so that instead of just having the option to choose it, you can still choose an anchor, the upper left-hand corner, but you can now create a grid and specify it to fill a box. So you just want to select the box with the digitizer tool and then use the Create Grid option, and you'll see that you can specify the number of rows, columns, cell width, and the grid bounds. You want to crop to selected area features, which is the box we just selected with the digitizer tool. And then we go with the default 10 rows, 10 columns. If we zoom in, we'll see that we have a nice grid created from our box.
Sorry, Jasmine, sorry for interrupting. This is an extremely useful tool, by the way. One of my personal favorites in the new feature list at 15.1. And if you're involved in any sampling work or any of this type, this is an arbitrary grid that was generated that we, as Jasmine mentioned, we wanted to fill an existing rectangular feature. So we didn't have to specify the width. That was done for us. And as you can see, it generated I think Jasmine selected a 10 by 10 grid. Just to put this in a practical application, I'm going to turn on the original layer that we had displayed, which is, these are our communication towers. And now you can see our grid overlaying those towers. One of the things that I've used before as a demonstration of this tool is the ability now to do that count of points, which is an automatic attribution tool. We used this a few minutes ago in a different context. So adding a point of counts and lines in this case to selected areas. My grid is still selected. confirming that that has worked, I'm just going to go ahead and use my feature info button, and you can see now for each of these grid tiles, that one's empty. We've got 12 points. We've got, let me make sure I grab an actual tile here. It looks like it's grabbing the points themselves. There we go. So there's four points in that cell. So it's very useful for that that type of sampling work. Sorry for interrupting, Jasmine, but I want to wave the flag for this tool.
Absolutely. It's a great tool. I think the example I came up with when we were going over it was archaeology. I think I'm an Indiana Jones buff, so I could. It's definitely be very helpful if you are digging square holes anytime in the near future and need to plan those out. Moving on, we have added an option to select point features within the distance of a drawn line feature. So to sort of set this up, what you would do is sort of manually draw a line across some point features. And then you want to select the line and then right-click to open the Edit menu. And then you can go to Advanced Selection Options. And then you want to select point features near the selected line features. And that will allow you to specify the distance from the line, the point features you want to select. So another handy way of specifically selecting features in Global Mapper without the click and drag, but allowing you to specify the distance from another feature for the features that you want to select.
Yeah, again, I can see a value in that for instance, if you're in the pipeline business, you can see whatever the asset is, whatever that point asset is, the distance or within a specific threshold, the number of, I don't know, nest sites or whatever they happen to be within a specified distance of that pipeline. So again, very useful function. Sorry, Jasmine.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. And so we have one other addition that I wanted to talk about, which has to do with managing attributes. We have an additional sort of outside the digitizer enhancements with 15.1, but we've added an attribute setup tab, and this is when you're exporting to shapefile. So if you go to Export, Vector Format, and then select Shapefile, okay, and you'll see that there is now an attribute setup tab to the Export to Shapefile dialog. It allows you to customize exported attribute types, links, and sort of specify the formatting that you want to use for those attributes for the exported shapefile.
That's right, and you'll notice, Jasmine just brought up the dialog box, you'll notice that by default all of these attributes are defined as string, and very often you may be working with an application where you want to specify the format, the data format, whether it's a floating point value or an integer in this case, and indeed the length as well. So the length is generated from the contents of the attributes, but you can make that more specifically. So the shape value export will include that information, making it compatible with whatever software that you're migrating that into. Thanks, Jasmine. There's one other digitizer tool. I'm just looking through my notes here, and I think we have a minute or so to spare. One I want to show you that is not a new function, but is something that has been changed slightly, improved, I would say. We now have the towers on our screen. In the Overlay Control Center, I select that layer and I right-click. One of the options I have is B-boxes, bounding boxes, or coverage area. We can create an area feature that defines the extent of the contents of this layer. And there are a couple of ways of doing this, as you'll see when I click on that option. One is to create an MBR, which is a rectangular area, which is basically a box that will encompass, a rectangular box encompassing the full extent of the points. The other is to create a polygon area. Can never say that word, polygonal, I don't know, polygon area. And this is what has changed. If I select the no option in this dialog box, I'm now going to be prompted to choose whether the coverage area is going to be what's defined as smooth or rough. And if you look at the outline of these points, it's kind of difficult to envisage how a line that will be generated that connects to the outside points. So I'm going to show you the extreme examples here just to show you how this works. And click OK on the smooth option first. And it's generating an my layer is turned off, there we go, excuse all the other digitizing mess in the middle, but you'll see with my smooth option, this outline box is a pretty smooth box, as the name implies, but it really cuts a lot of corners, giving me coverage area at a very, what I would say, a low resolution. Let me go ahead and delete that feature so we can see the results of what we're going to do next, which is the same process. Again, bounding boxes, no to create a polygon area, and this time we'll make it rough, and this is going to adhere more specifically to the points themselves. Oh, I think I had too much junk on my map there. Let's try that. Let's, you get the idea. I think what I did is I actually tried to generate the box based on those points within that area. So, but that rough option gives you a much more precise model for that digitizing process. One more thing I want to talk about today before we wrap up, and mentioned this already. I know the question came in about the raster calculator. There have been some changes made to the raster calculator. It's a new tool, new in 15, but we've already enhanced it significantly. So if you have been using it in the standard version of 15, 15.1 is going to give you significantly more functionality. Let me show you a very simple example of a new function before we get into some more advanced tools. I'm going to bring in, excuse me while I try to multitask, talk and click at the same time. It's sometimes difficult. I'm going to bring in my elevation layer that we were working with before. So this is just a standard DEM, digital elevation model. One of the changes we've made to the raster calculation capability is to now address the Z or Z value in an elevation layer. Previously, it was the bands defined the calculation process, bands within a raster image. Now we can do it based on the Z value, and I'm going to show you a very simple example of this. Raster calculator is under the analysis menu. We'll come back and visit this in a different context, looking at some of the other pre-configured formulas that are available. But I'm going to apply a raster calculation to my elevation model. We'll go ahead and click OK on this, and I'm going to do a custom formula where I'm going to take the Z value, and I'm just going to simply multiply it by an arbitrary value. I'll make the value pretty large so we can actually see the results. So we'll multiply it by 100. So we're going to take every Z value within this raster layer, and my extent of my elevation, as you'll see on the left side of my screen currently, is from 1 meter to 122 meters. By multiplying this by 100, it should significantly increase that elevation legend. So let's go ahead and we'll do that. Oh, we need to add that formula first. I'll add that band. So there's our formula has been added to the applicable list, and we click OK. And again, you'll see the elevation legend is my clue that those values have been increased significantly. The overall structure looks the same because I'm using this Atlas shader, so the color distribution is the same, but the Z values themselves, if you notice at the bottom corner of my screen, right down here along the bottom, you'll see the elevation values are Mount Everest height right here in central Maine. So that's just one example of the raster calculator. Another new function is that we have added a pre-configured formula for generating the normalized burn ratio. Now, those of you who are not in the wildfire management business may not have heard of this, but this is a very useful and very often used raster analysis tool that allows you to do an analysis of the damage caused by wildfires. Typically, that's the way it's used. Now, for this example, I'm going to go to somewhere where, if you haven't already been there, I do encourage you to go. And this is Yellowstone National Park, and mostly in the state of Wyoming here in the U.S., has had problems with wildfires in the past, and we've got some data pertaining to those wildfires. I actually have two multi-band geotiffs. One you'll notice says pre and one says post. I want to deal with the post file first, and actually want to turn off my reference layer. Now, the visible representation of this, you can't really discern a lot of information, so I'm going to apply a calculation to generate that normalized burn ratio from this imagery, and this is a pre-configured formula, as I mentioned before. So we open up our raster calculator once again, confirm the layer on which we want to perform this analysis, which is selected, and we choose normalized burn ratio. You will notice another pre-configured in the various renditions of this, the normalized difference vegetation index is also in here as well. This was added with version 15.0. The normalized burn ratio is new, uses bands 4 and band 6. So if I go ahead and select that, it is pre-configured for me. I don't need to generate the formula myself. It's all done for me. I simply click OK. It will recognize the bands involved. I click OK again, and hopefully will give me a layer, and you'll see the results of this. Now, in terms of Global Mapper, how we deal with this data, this is an elevation layer. We know it doesn't actually represent the actual height, but the elevation in this case is just a representation of the z-value. And the z-value in this ratio goes from -1 to 1. That's the normalized burn ratio information right here. Now, with the Atlas shader, quite difficult to discern what's going on. I'm going to change it, and I've actually generated a custom shader called NBR. You can do this yourselves. You can add your own custom shading pattern, basically defining the colors that I want. And this makes it a little clearer where the extent of the burn area is, and you can see that highlighted right here, derived from that raster calculation. I put this in a little context. I'm going to conduct the same analysis on the pre-burn imagery. Let me turn everything else off. Very quickly go through the same process again. Same formula applied. We'll go ahead and add that band and click OK. And it's going to, again, generate another new layer for me. So if I activate both of those calculated layers, both the pre and post, I can use my image swipe. And I can pull one back and see the extent of the burn. As you can see, the information derived from that analysis right here. There's a lot of information online about the normalized burn ratio if you want some more information. U.S. Forest Service have an extensive online resource if you want to read out about that analysis process. Global Mapper now has the ability to calculate those values. So that's another change, another enhancement that has been added to version 15.1. Any other questions coming in, Jasmine?
I have a question about installing 15.1. Will installing 15.1 override previous Global Mapper installations, older versions, or 15.0?
I think I did mention this earlier, but to clarify, and again, it is a very valid question, just to make sure you're aware. Let's go through the various possibilities. If you're currently using version 15.0, and you install version 15.1. You can download it at the end of the webinar today. You can download it free of charge. Install. It will pick up the license you have from version 15. It will override the application. Your application will now have an updated build. And you'll see in my toolbar, mine says version 15.1, and you'll see the build date right here as well. So you will be able to do that. It's an automated process. For those of you using version 14, 13, or older, if you go through that path and you install version 15, the latest build, which we know is version 15.1, that will sit side by side. You will not it will not override. It's not an upgrade to your existing software. You can still use the old version. It will still be active. Your license will still apply. You can request a 2-week license for the new version. So that's kind of the rule. It depends which version you're working on. Either it will upgrade if you're on the current build, or it will sit side by side if you've got an older build. I think we're just about out of time. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to hopefully learn a little bit about version 15.1, the latest build of Global Mapper. I do encourage you, as a follow-up, download the application. It's right on our website. Let me go ahead and bring up my PowerPoint again, and if you don't know the address, www.bluemarblegeo.com is where you can go and go to the Global Mapper link, download version 15.1, and try it out. Basically, go through the new functions and see if it works for you. We look forward to speaking with you again next month. The announcement about February's webinars has already been posted on our website, so registration is open. You can go to the webinars page on our website and register for February's webinars.
If our support team has not been able to answer any questions you submitted during the webinar, we will follow up with you using the email that you used to register for the webinar. On your screen, you'll also see our support email address that you can use if you have any questions in the future.
That's right, and just one more reminder, we've been talking about the recordings of our webinars. This is being recorded today, so give us a few days, but we will go ahead and post this on our website. There's a link under the support page to pre-recorded webinars, and you can go back and view the previous ones, or indeed follow up on this one as well. So again, thank you Jasmine, for your help today, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, David. We look forward to speaking with you again at next month's webinar.